Hi, everyone, and welcome to April's Parent Education Night featuring Amy Estersohn in a session called Planning for College and Beyond. I was honored to meet Amy when I was attending a SANG conference supporting emotional needs of the gifted. And I've been very inspired by Amy's work at Lead with Talents and how she provides a lot of resources and support for post-secondary future planning, specifically for students who are gifted and twice exceptional. So you're in for a treat, and we're excited to think and plan together. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself anymore?
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be here, and like I said, really happy to join on. Just making sure that you can see my slides and they take up the whole full screen.
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. So hi everyone, my name is Amy Estersohn. You're here for heading towards the future of planning for college and beyond. So let me talk a little bit about myself. I've just checked my notes. It's not on the slide. Um, so like I said, I've been working with students on sort of big picture planning college and career process for about 15 years, give or take. I worked first in admissions and in career guidance at the University of Chicago. So I was working with high school students. I was admitting high school students to college, and then they were in college, I was helping them with resumes, job search strategies, cover letters. I learned that you can be a very smart person and still need a lot of support on how to how to convey your strengths to a job position. So that was a real eye opener for me. Um, I am I wear many hats in my life. My professional work crosses many boundaries, but it includes education, advocacy, and working with students on these big picture college and career planning aspects as well. So I do also work with individual students and families. So I feel like the introductions, like I already got a sense I feel like we don't have a ton of time. So I'm gonna like go into a few details. So the first thing I want to do is kind of very high level, big picture advice with an eye towards students who are gifted, twice exceptional, exceptional needs. I'm going to talk about three areas of planning: academic, social, and personal leadership. I understand that people have a range of children's ages. So some of this might be like, put this on a shelf, and take it out in 10 years or 5 years when you need it. And then because I often get questions about the highly selective process, I'm going to go through what I call the Ivy League calculator. I do not think every gifted, exceptional student is necessarily a good Ivy League student. In fact, I had someone the other day who emailed me and was like, "Oh, Amy, I listened to a presentation from 5 years ago, and you recommended this college on your webinar, and my son's there. And how did you know it's such a great school for him? I would never have thought of it." That's so there's a broad scope here, right? But because a lot of people say, well, how does my kid get into Harvard? I want to at least kind of go down that path for a moment. And then maybe we can have that conversation about, is that the right, every profile is a little different. Would that be the right choice for your future, your planning future? Also thinking a little bit about where the future's heading. I'll probably add in some more thoughts as I go, and we'll have some time for Q&A. So it's an ambitious agenda and not a ton of time in which to get it done. So the big picture advice, I say, like, let yourself be anxious. You're allowed to be anxious. There's so many things to be anxious about. Take your pick. So don't let someone tell you, like, yo, relax, don't worry. So many things you can be worried about, but I do think that you have to. I would encourage you to draw that boundary about your anxiety, about when the anxiety is making the decision for you. I think that's like kind of, to me, the boundary of where you should be anxious, when it's like when you're making a decision because you're anxious, or the anxiety is preventing you from making a decision, that's maybe the time to kind of stop and say, wait a sec, is this anxiety kind of getting out of its little like walled garden? Um, I also think that you and your children are probably already, if you're here on this webinar, I'm assuming that you've kind of been used to being a little bit on a different path. Maybe your children are on different paths. Maybe you look at your kids and say, you know, I'm not really sure that a 4-year college environment is going to be like the best place for them when they're 18, 19, 20 years old. And I would just encourage you to be aware of what the paths that might make sense for your child and realize that that's okay, right? And also I do think there's a lot of need for space and time for incubation, growth, and rest. I think both for ourselves and for the people we work with, we never want to rush things. We never want to hurry things. We never want things to, we never want to be in a position where we feel like we're yelling at something to grow from the ground. So part of that is maybe for us understanding ourselves and our people and understanding that a lot of things are going to take time, and that time in the ground, time in incubation is important time. It's time well earned. It's not boring. It's not off. It is time that we need. So let me talk a little bit about academic growth. And instead of, I'm kind of just giving targets. And I am thinking of these as targets for like middle school into high school. That's kind of the ideal audience here. But like I said, maybe you will have a sense of your children as I go through this. And so maybe you're like, this is what we're working towards, or this is what, my child has already exceeded this target. So one of the academic growth targets is increased endurance in homework, and endurance in work products. When I say work product, I know that depending on the school environment, there might not be a lot of out of class homework. It's also there are a lot of homework is a very loaded term. So if it's not homework, if it's not practicing, math problems at home or whatnot, what sorts of work products are being made? What sort of work products are the students working on? Is it a science experiment? Is it writing a story? Is it reading a book? Whatever it is that they can say, I did this, I worked on it. Are they increasing the amount of time that they're spending on those activities, so that they're kind of building endurance, so they can say, yes, I can read a book. I can read a book fairly quickly. Yes, I can work on this thing that interests me. I can work on it. I can work on it with endurance. Another kind of area for growth and a target area is confidently presenting ideas. This is, I think, important to develop middle school into high school and then into college. I always use this example by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, world famous computer science program, and that's been world famous and is continuing to grow. And the Terrified required course, the course that has all computer science students at MIT shaking in their shoes, is presentational speaking. Presentational speaking is required of computer scientists at MIT. I think it is also for many students at Princeton also requires it of its engineers. So there's no how do I say this? There's no compelling justification of, oh, I'm an engineer, I don't have to talk to people about what I do. No, if anything, you do need to learn how to talk to people about what you do. So even if it's short, even if it's quick, it doesn't mean that every student is going to be, star speech giver to the graduating class, but to learn how to share an idea with one person, 2 people, 5 people, a classmate, a class, whatever that idea is, to think of that as a place to grow and then a place to celebrate when that milestone is hit, and then hopefully maybe the next milestone, right? How can we take that skill and now do something a little more? Another place, like I said, the kind of question when we get to the point where the high school student applies to college and arrives on admissions reader desk, really the question is the ability to complete a college major and distribution requirements. Very often for brilliant, it's usually STEM students. For brilliant STEM students who are like so many ideas, the two and engineers, the two kind of speed bumps, the major speed bumps for those students tend to be chemistry for a lot of like aspiring mechanical engineers. The idea of sitting down and doing chemistry, the patience required, the details required, and the abstract nature of chemistry for a mechanical engineer, those three aspects can turn a kid off from mechanical engineering. So the admissions reader is really sitting there and saying, can this kid survive chemistry? That's one. And I think the other is, you got to wake up in the morning, get to your classes, right? So making sure that students are fairly organized and fairly self-motivated to make it on time for those 8:30 lectures. Other academic growth targets, organizational long-term planning skills. Like I said, that's one of those things that depending on how old your children are now, you just want to have that in the background. Are they learning how to do that? How are they learning how to do that? Have they had practice with that? And my last one, this is my favorite, confidence in approaching teachers and adults. In high school, I think a lot of students, especially bright students, tend to ignore their teachers, or they might talk to a teacher about a grade, and then kind of don't engage with their teachers. But one of the things that college professors and college culture tries to teach, but doesn't always do so successfully, or it takes time, is how helping college students learn how to have peer-to-peer conversations with people who have PhDs and adults. I think in high school, in particular, middle school and high school, it's like I'm the student, you're the teacher. And then the kind of more egalitarian sharing of ideas is part of that. So I often talk to students about, learning that you can ask a question about, family members or pets or vacations. What are you doing this vacation? Learning how encouraging young people to understand how to confidently approach people, and then how to have appropriate academic, collaborative, but also socially collaborative conversations and back and forth. Tremendous skills. So social growth targets, like I said, I want to go through other sorts of developmental things that we're all thinking about that are important for the college process. Interactions, I call this interactions with safe strangers. When I say safe stranger, I think of that, my classic safe stranger would be like you're at a religious group, you don't know someone, but you're in a church, a synagogue, a mosque that you go to. I would call that person a safe stranger for, from an adolescent's point of view. This is someone you don't know them personally, but the fact that they showed up in a community that you're already established and comfortable with says something about their values, who they are, and their relative trustworthiness. So the kind of hypothetical question of how is your child interacting with that hypothetical person in your religious community that they don't know yet. And hopefully, middle school to high school to college, the depth and sophistication of those kinds of interactions is growing. I have other things here about kind of when I say handle unknown elements, I think that can be anything from a surprise, like, hey, a friend and I were going to get together, and then all of a sudden plans changed. That kind of unknown element. Fluidity of conversational range. So again, figuring out things like, what do I like to talk about? What does the person like to talk about? How do I move in between conversations? How do I move in between conversations? Other sorts of social growth elements. All of us are working on these in different ways all the time. How do we be active listeners? How do we develop skills of empathy towards ourselves and towards each other? How do we conversation endurance? How do we extend conversations? How do we deepen conversations? And I put these last two on here, and I know I'm trying to think about maybe this will come to me more in a moment. Building trust and being trustworthy. To me, those are issues. Those are kind of almost like from character. They're not social in the way of like having a fun conversation, or they're not social like telling a joke. But they're social like I can trust somebody, and I know someone I can trust, and um I know that I can ask this person to help me on an assignment, or I know that I can do this fun project with this friend. I know I can ask a teacher for help. I know I can join this club at school. That's what I kind of mean by building trust on the out. And then being trustworthy is kind of on the in. I know that I'm not going to, if I commit to a friend on something, if I make a commitment, I'm not going to back out. I know that I'm going to honor my word. I know that I'm going to, if someone is relying on me to do something, I'm going to do it. So those are also kind of skills that are ongoing and built. And the way I see it is, especially I'm thinking more middle school into high school, so more high school students, but all sorts of activities that they can do are going to demonstrate all of these skills. So I look at these social growth as kind of vague. I don't know, vague. They're like broad. They're so broad, but they can be applied in so many ways. So for example, if you're on the school musical, um, you're being trustworthy because you're showing up to rehearsal, right? You showing up to rehearsal is your example of being trustworthy. If you're in the school musical, you talking to someone who is you haven't seen them before and you don't have any classes with them, that can be an interaction with a safe stranger. You're in the school musical and you have a rehearsal and you or your partner forgets their lines completely. Oh, that's an ability to handle an unknown element, right? So I'm just using that example to think about the different ways that these social growth you can kind of hit these social growth targets with almost any kind of activity. But I kind of name them so that as parents, you can kind of think about all of the developing skills in the background that are happening on a day-to-day basis. The last one here is the personal leadership target. So for me, I'll just kind of review for a moment. I started with academic targets, and in a way, by academic targets, you can say, well, Amy, that's not really academic in the way I think of it. I think of these as more like the student hardware skills. And then I talked about some social growth target. And for me, social is not really telling a joke. Social, that's not really my definition of social here. And then the personal leadership target. I think this is maybe what you may have thought of, or like the first thing that came to mind. But here's where another place where I think, to think about how do we grow this? Growing initiative, distinction in an interest area, research, and depth of knowledge and experience. Especially when it comes to planning, especially when it comes to what comes ahead. I think the more students are engaging outside the classroom, using the classroom environment, but also having an active life outside of the classroom, that will bring them forward, both as they apply to college, but also within their lives. So okay. I realize I'm looking at this slide and I've been talking a lot at you. So I just want to mention, I guess, that, these slides will send out later, but I started with these big categories because I think that when we start with the broad, then you can kind of you can answer your questions better. So you can kind of, you're sitting down and you're, 2 years from now, you'll say, okay, my child's between honors algebra 2 and this course. And I think then you say, which one should my child take? And that's when, taking out the academic goals and maybe going through the checklist that I provided in the slides, and then saying like, oh, this course will help in this way, this way, this way. This course will help here. This course will help here. Or, looking at social goals. Why is my child participating in theater? What social goals are being met here? How are these going forward? I also start here because if I were to tell you, here are all the things your kid needs to do to get into college, here's a checklist. Take this course, do 30 community service hours, write this essay, do this, sign up for this mailing list. If I were to give you a checklist of activities, first off, it would not really be efficient. And it wouldn't really answer the deeper questions about why you're doing something. So it's not really an enjoyable or effective approach to think about like what your next steps are. Because listen, the questions are the same. Should it be this class or this class? Should the child go this direction or this direction? Should they do tennis or soccer? Should they, sit at home for the summer? Should we stay home for the summer or travel? So I always like to start big picture. Okay. So I'm going to transition from these big thinking questions into a little more of a formula. I will encourage you, if you don't have it next to you, this might be fun with a pen and paper to write down some numbers, not like you can even use like a post-it note size. I'll present it to you as a hypothetical. You can even do this if your children are young. You might kind of evaluate yourself as a high school student. So like I said, hopefully everyone can kind of try this as an experiment and play along. So I'm going to call this the Ivy League calculator. And I think disclaimer one, not every gifted student is going to be happy at an Ivy League school, but rather I'm sort of playing out the curiosity, like, well, what would it take for my child to get into Harvard kind of conversation? This is also not, you're not going to show up to the Harvard admissions office information session, actually meet a live Harvard admissions officer and say, waha, I learned there's an Ivy League calculator. And they're going to say, what? So this is not an actual tool used. It is inspired by real indices and matrices, but this is not like, I'm not giving you anything that's like branded, right? This is something that's generic that I developed inspired by real life situations. This is also not really meant as a will I get in. You're not going to call me up and say, hey, Amy, my child's a 13 and they didn't, it's more it's more just a kind of metric of how close am I to being reasonable for Ivy League admission, because I think sometimes what happens is students don't always recognize or appreciate what the competition looks like. So like I said, when I've done presentations before, these tend to be popular kind of estimates, and people tend to like these. So if you like it, great. And if you don't like it, bear with me for a bit. So we're going to do this in, we have three major categories: academics, extracurriculars, distinctions, and bonus points. I think 20 points are theoretically available. I actually feel like in some cases it's possible to get like 21 points, but some points are contradictory. So in other words, you can't be both from the East Coast and the West Coast, for example, right? You can't be from both a city school and a rural school. So realize that even though maybe 20 points might be theoretically available, no one's going to get a perfect score because you can't be simultaneously from a city school and a small school. And just so you know, my metric here, if you're going to say, again, the real question is how good is good. 13 points is kind of what I'm calling the magic number for yeah, you're really in the running. Okay. So let's start with imagine an academic rating. We're going to you can give yourself, or maybe a spouse, if you a number from 1 to 5. The student who has the 5 has This is key. Maxed out curriculum in their high school in every area. So every honors class, every subject available. This is not, well, this kid likes math, but they're in, they're not taking the hard classes in English and history because they're only a math kid. For the level we're talking about, we're really looking for students to be rigorous across the board in all areas. We're also looking for students who have achieved near perfect standardized test results, perfect or near perfect GPA. I would encourage you, if you're following the game along at home, if you're like, well, it's between a 4 and a 5, that's a 4. That's a 4. It'll be such a temptation to round this up. Really try to be conservative about the 5s. And my suggestion is that most people are a 3 or 4. I would also encourage you to give yourself a whole number. Just again, give yourself that challenge of, oh shucks. So if you're like if you feel like you might be a 3.5, try to give yourself a whole number. And if you're between numbers, I would also say think about maybe choice of major. If you're like, let's say you're a 3.5, you're like, yeah, it's not the best. It's not, doesn't feel like it's a level down. It feels like a level in between that. So I would say this, if you're applying for like pre-med, round down to a 3. If you're, especially like sciences, pre-med engineering, I might go a little more conservative, see if you might, so in other words, I would vote down. I would kind of, I'm trying to say, for the competitive majors, I would be more inclined to say, give yourself a 3 just to get more accurate results. So you've given yourself a kind of rough rating of 1 to 5 on academics. Now let's just we're just talking about the raw unit of time. How much time does the student spend on extracurriculars? You'll notice it goes from 0 to 5. And I say 0 to 5 very intentionally because getting a 1 is not hard. Getting a 1 is not hard. It is participation in a school club at some point sometimes. Getting a 2 is also not difficult in the sense of maybe a student does 1 sport per season per year. So one sport per year. Okay, they have some activity. They have some activity in there. Believe it or not, most students get to that 10-ish. And you'll notice that I said if it's not exactly 10 hours, you're like, because I can just see this right now. A lot of people are going to say, Amy, it's really more like 7. It's church, it's Boy Scouts, and it's volleyball, right? And so sometimes that means sometimes it's 3 hours a week, and then sometimes it's 12 hours a week in season. And you're like, technically it rounds to 7, but you could see a case where it kind of feels like 10 because it's like church and Boy Scouts and volleyball. I would say that to me, you can round up to a 3. However, don't round up to a 4. The 3 is kind of the place to meet. And I'll point out that the 4 and 5 are students who are spending 15 to 20 hours a week. So again, 10 hours a week-ish, 7, and again, sometimes it's 7 and not actually 10, is a sort of benchmark to start at, especially for the competitive schools. But I just also want to acknowledge that there are levels above. So the 15 and 20 is sort of the step up for those competitive schools. So we have an academic rating, we have an extracurricular kind of hour rating. Now let's talk about distinctions. Again, 0 to 5. Let's just mention the 0. And this is an important place to start, the 0. The 0 is the student who is not demonstrating a fit with what the institution offers. So I realize IT, some schools offer IT, but many don't. Or actually, like University of Pennsylvania is an Ivy League, they have a nursing school, so that one's not consistent. But if you are looking for a major that the school doesn't offer and doesn't offer anything close, then that is very hard to admit a student who wants a program that you do not offer. It's very hard to make that case. So that to me is a 0. A one is a student who, is interested in a program the school offers, but those programs are oversubscribed. So for most of the schools, at least Ivy League-ish, we're thinking that's computer science, mechanical engineering, pre-med, business. Those tend to be the ones. The two is, again, notice that the oversubscribed programs, there's a little bit of a higher threshold to get the distinction. The two is a student, okay, I'm interested in computer science and I have experience on the robotics team. I'm interested in business and I read this bunch of books of fun and I'm a huge math nerd. I'm interested in mechanical engineering and I did this really neat summer Saturday program, right? That's a two. The student who, let's say, I'm interested in religious studies. Okay, like great, that student has an easier time getting a two than the students in the oversubscribed programs. To get to the three is the student who has this sort of competitive recognition in an oversubscribed program, or I said irrelevant engagement. So it's almost like the non-oversubscribed kid just needs to do a thing. And then the more oversubscribed computer science, pre-med, business, those kids need a little bit more, can need a little bit more recognition. So what does that mean? I am I want to do computer science. I'm involved in computer science and I've received an award, a contest. I've done something with my school. And I want to be clear too, competitive recognition here is a little intentionally vague because every place will look different for competitive recognition. Competitive recognition for one kid who doesn't have a ton of resources or other access to competitions is going to be like, I got an award from my teacher named me student of the quarter. That's a competitive recognition. Or for some kids, if they attend a school that's just has like really competitive teams already, that might be like participation on that competitive team or in the competitive academic team. And then you're looking at this kind of the four and the five. So the fours and the fives, the four is the student who is like, I have competitive recognition in, here's an example might be like, I am one of the best vocalists in North Carolina, right? Would be like the competitive recognition in our field. It's hard to be one of the best vocalists in North Carolina. And then the five of that would be like, I am the best vocalist in North Carolina, and you're the best voice program, and you're recruit, and you need me for your program. Or that's the best way I describe it. The kind of like the school is looking for students like you to fill seats in a niche program it has, and you're coming in from a high school with a track record and some sort of decoration or a recognition that you're talented in this area. That's the five. So I hope that kind of gives you a scale of things. I would say that most students applying to the competitive schools are either a two or a three. Not as many students make it to the four or five. So additional factors. So if just to review for a sec, basically a 9 out of 20 is not too difficult, but it's that 13 that we're looking for. So that, and I said, if you get to a 13, that's when I say, yeah, you're pretty competitive. So it's a good question to ask yourself, like, again, hypothetically for you or for someone else, what might be a few areas for you to maybe add a point or two, if this is something that interests you, right? What might be the next way to move a level up in candidacy? And so I just want to give you a range and I want to give some context. So, and this is a little bit twisty. So there are other factors that might influence an application. So one of the simple ones is, did you apply early decision? Did you apply early decision as an opportunity for students and parents to indicate that there's a clear first choice? So did you apply in a round that was a clear first choice, binding and exclusive? If I get in, I'm admitted. and I go. That's early decision. So if you apply early decision, it is definitely in your advantage. Not always the advantage people think it is. Again, just about 1 point. So it's not like, oh, you're going to get in because you applied early decision, but rather, if you're already a competitive candidate, it will probably help you. If you attend a local public school, by which I mean, if you attend a school that's right near the university, if you're local to the area, they do tend to be a little more generous towards kids from their backyard. It can help. It can help. But what all can also help is being from an uncommon region or school. So if you're coming in and they're like, wow, we really don't see a lot of kids from Colorado. This is our chance to increase our regional diversity. That might help you, right? Other factors, so let's say parents are professors, or parents went there, or there's another big donor connection. That's going to vary. And I've seen enough situations where people think, I've seen the situations where people kind of sit and say, oh, I just assumed that the kid would get in because we have a very strong connection, it's a very competitive school. And I'm the one who sometimes says it's not as easy, like I said, like almost like anything else, it's not the only thing they're making decisions on. And sure, yes, you have the connection, but it's not often the thing that gets the student admitted, in the same way they may think. And then I also gave a factors not covered elsewhere. So this might be that sort of like something interesting or unusual I can see helping a student. So I wanted to just give that kind of unknown. So hopefully for those of you who are playing along at home, you are maybe doing your scoring, realizing that a lot of kids I would say there's a lot of kids applying probably are 9s or 10s out of 20s, where 13 is really the level to aspire to. If you're going to say like, I really think I'm a competitive candidate, it's probably level 13. And realizing too, there are many different kind of ways to get to a 13. It's not just one route. So I want to point that out too. I'm just reading over the comments. If your high school offers a lots of APs, is it better to shoot for breadth or depth? So I think I will say this, let's take a step back and say that it's going to depend on the high school and the student, and the student's kind of overall goals. And it will also, it will also depend on the high school and the high school culture. So it would be hard for me to give an individual recommendation because I don't know, like I said, I don't know the individual student and where their goals are. I will say that if the student is interested in, highly competitive schools, I would say first, double check with your school. But just my encouragement would be to do the part to challenge yourself in every area. And also talk to your school about what does the school consider the most rigorous schedule and how, and most rigorous available and most rigorous appropriate. But there are students who do not choose to do all APs available to them, and who choose, hey, I'm going to accelerate in art history and drama, but I'm not taking AP United States. And from my vantage point, students who make those decisions are not penalized in the college process, but those students also made maybe different choices about where they wanted to go to school. Or I'm thinking of another student recently who, was admitted to competitive schools, excellent schools, had lots and lots of talents. Math was not particularly the talent. And my encouragement to that in that situation was take the math, take as much math as you can to show that you can do it. You don't have to do more. Another example I can think of is another student who is good at math, but not amazing at math, finished math at his high school. Math is not his passion spot. And he's like, oh man, do I have to keep taking math now? And again, similarly, I said, well, you've already shown that you can do it. It's not your passion area. You have lots of other passion areas. You might consider this time to do something else, right? So what I'm trying to say is, I know it's a long answer, but I just want to say there's not one single answer that's an all one size fits all situation. And just the way, like, there are many ways to get a 13, there are many ways to build a rigorous schedule. And then also rigorously appropriate schedule too. Okay. I just want to add one more note on finances. I was thinking about this, putting the slides together. A lot of chaos right now on college tuitions and scholarships. Especially nowadays, if you see a price tag on a college and you're rolling your eyes, I know you might roll your eyes, apply anyway. You don't know. You might find yourself getting a surprisingly big scholarship that you didn't even know you were asking for. Right now, I'm looking also at the federal landscape. There's a new lifetime limit on taking out federal loans. I don't know if this is going to stick around, but if it does, it's going to make college and grad school more expensive. So it is something to watch out for if people are taking it, tap down on federal loans, or to take out private loans. I also think it's a really important thing to think about what's worth it to your family and why. It's not me saying this is what you should do, but rather an encouragement to save and spend according to your values, and know what those values are so that you're not caught off guard. Like I said, sometimes having done this work, I think sometimes I encourage parents to have difficult conversations about affordability further up in the process, maybe 9th, 10th grade. What can we afford? Why can we afford it? So that then you go through the process and you're not saying, the kid isn't saying, I'm going to laugh because this happens all the time, goodness gracious. I'm going to apply to the University of California schools, which really don't give a lot of out-of-state financial aid. And the parents are like, oh, we're traveling to California to go see the UCs. And I'm like, sure, but I don't think this is in your value set. Like, go have fun on vacation in California. Go have fun. But is this I don't like, I'm like, I don't really think these schools are values aligned for you right now. But again, people are going to make their decisions. So let me also say I have other thoughts, and then I'll take some questions. I think especially with gifted students, gifted students are very deep thinkers. And college is often a time for maturation and kind of attending to social needs. Sometimes it's less the academic side than the social side. And so that's also a big consideration. Like I said, helping families make those decisions about where those places are going to be that are going to meet the academic needs, but also maybe meet the social needs too. I have this kind of other slide in here, kind of wrapping up. But what am I anticipating when I think about the job market in the future, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing? I do think there's a space for those philosopher lawyers, people who are thinking about AI, but also about being human and hopefully living deeply human existences. I see a lot of work happening on energy grids. I think that's kind of, again, coming down. Where are we getting energy from? How is our electrical grid working? Or not working, as the case may be. And not just the kind of engineering side, but also politics, fundraising, talking to leaders about what's needed. There's a lot of public speaking, a lot of advocacy. So to me, if I say hey, I think there's going to be a real need for building and rebuilding an energy grid in our country and our nation's infrastructure, I'm not saying necessarily that your child's going to be the one like digging the ditches or like building blueprints of stuff, but rather your child might be the one, talking to local people and being the kind of community builder and communicator. I also think a lot of innovation around water sourcing and filtration. I see this as an exciting field right now. So again, whether that's the sales side, building the connections, the actual engineering technology, or product development, project development, and managing teams. So these are kind of big areas that I'm thinking about, that I'm seeing when I'm working with students, and like what's growing and what seems exciting, realizing that all these things could change and grow and develop. But I just feel like, especially in these uncertain times, it's sometimes nice to think about like the future and where we can steer ourselves a little bit. So thank you so much. I do want to open up for some questions. Um, and I know, and I have my website here. I'll also type it in the chat if you want to follow up. And I thank you for being here so much. And so Jennifer, thank you. You said I think schools are published to require their discount rate. Yeah, I think that there is, so the idea of the discount rate is kind of complicated because there's like different sources of aid, need-based and merit-based aid. And so I think the discount rate is complicated because everyone's coming into the store. Everyone's coming into the store with a different amount of money in the wallet, and everyone's coming out with a different item at a different price depending on what they came in with. But if you are interested, his name is Jeff Salingo, and he has like a Google stock. I think you've downloaded it from him, but when I say download, I think he's looking for he wants your email, so signing up for your newsletter. His newsletter is fine. Buyers and sellers list, and he's one of the people who likes to track like how colleges are distributing scholarship money. When I advise families, I don't, how do I say this? I think I think his data is great on the sort of like big picture level, looking at a situation 3,000 feet in the air. But my work with families is a little more nuanced. So sometimes I will make suggestions that don't really follow the list, but just kind of personal experience and insight, helping families meet goals. And again, for me, when I work with families, I just always want to make sure there's like three things I want to make sure. I want to make sure that the kid gets into college. I want to make sure that some options are at price. I want to make sure there's a range of price points, including price points the family identifies as reasonable. And you would or would not be surprised. Some families I've worked with, and how much they want to spend for college is sometimes people might not make a lot of money, but college is really the value. And sometimes people bring home and have the savings, but this college is not what they just don't want to spend it on college. So I have to deal with both. And so that's always interesting, kind of building a list around the values of the client. And I also want to make sure the kid has a choice. I would hate it, and it's never hasn't happened to me yet, but I say that fingers crossed. But I want students to have options, and I never want to work with a student and the student just shrugs and says, oh, I'm sure I'll just go to school XYZ. I always want to make sure that there's a really good other option for them to at least compare against, so that if they decide to go to their local community college, they could at least say, well, I chose this college because XYZ. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? We do have a little more time.
I'll ask a question. What are some of your favorite colleges for our population? Where do people find good fits? I know it's different per person, but what do, which ones do you like?
That's a good question. Um, and I have an entire other presentation. Um, I have an entire other presentation, and I will also tell you that I custom make the presentation every time based on who's in the audience and their geography. So if I'm talking to West Coast people, I'm talking a lot. So I'll give you an example. If I'm talking to West Coast people and I know that they have a tuition exchange through the Western undergraduate exchange, so it's not tuition exchange, but they get like what if you go out of state in Western states, you get like 150% of in-state tuition. And so I use that to my advantage, and so I'm always like, hey, look at Oregon State University Honors College is like one example of a really solid place that just has a lot of options in it. And so like I said, there, and then my Virginia folks, when I do a lot of stuff in Virginia, I have like a list for them. I don't know if I have a Colorado list, but kind of at the ready. But I think what I do think about Colorado State higher ed system, I think, and again, this is part of my job. You got to know the cultures and you got to keep track of these things. At least the last time I looked into this, there was a very strong articulation culture between Colorado and collaborative culture among Colorado public colleges and universities. So starting off at a 2-year was a really nice way to kind of gain your feet into a 4-year. So if a student wanted to go to CU Boulder but wanted to start at a 2-year, or start at like Colorado Mesa has programs with UC. I think that's great. I know one of the programs that excites me a lot, and again, not for every gift. Put it this way, a place that I think is very exciting. Um, a place that I think is very exciting, knowing that it's very niche, is the Atlas Institute at CU Boulder, which is this sort of happy combination of computer science and art. And it's like a giant makerspace, happy building. It's not, I think the major is creative arts and technologies. So it's not a firm computer science major, but like if I had to decorate a college experience, I can't think of a place that's more fun than this. Very creative, very eclectic, and I think again worth checking out for a lot of kids. So I could see that being a good fit. So there we go. So my in-state again, I say Colorado. You have a nice opportunity, a nice culture starting at a 2-year, moving up if that's what you want. Uh, you can of course go lots of places in the country, and don't just for fun, go check out the Atlas Institute at CU Boulder. They have tours. I had so much fun on their tour. So even if you don't even know what it is, see if you can take a tour of the facility.
Thank you, Amy. There was one other question in the chat. At what age or age range might you recommend working on this schedule? And maybe I froze, or maybe you froze.
I think we lost Amy.
All righty. Thank you for joining us for this parent education night. And I will send out the recording and the slide deck soon.
Thank you so much.